I was approached by the press to give an interview about sexless relationships. Even the term itself is mild, euphemistic. So calling what is essentially an estranged relationship a sexless relationship is overly gentle. Approach. Unfortunately, there is a trend in sexology which I disagree with, where increasingly mild terms are given to various serious sexual disorders so as not to hurt people's egos too much. What used to be called impotence is now referred to as erectile dysfunction. Of course, one could argue that impotence is a permanent condition, while erectile dysfunction is mostly temporary in many cases. But even for permanent erectile dysfunction, the term erectile dysfunction, ED, is used, or erection disorder. Yes. So the word impotence, but no longer preferred. The same applies to frigidity. There are no longer frigid women, only women with low sexual desire, women with low libido, hypersexual women. And the same is true for men. So there should be no misunderstanding. The terms hypersexual and hypersexuality obviously apply to both genders. But since we started with frigidity, I referred to women. We no longer use the terms perverse or perversion either. I just recently wrote about this, and then someone called me on the phone asking how I could describe it as perversion when a man likes to expose his genitals, whether publicly or unsolicited, to anyone. Well, these people used to be called satyrs, but today they are referred to as penis senders, exhibitionists, or show-offs. And when they are categorized under a collective term, it is definitely not called perversion, but rather a fetish. So the terminology has become very, very refined here as well. My issue is not with the fact that we use such mild expressions for these, so to speak. And I don't want these people to be stigmatized. Of course, I don't want anyone to be stigmatized, but a person won't stigmatize themselves, in quotes, even though it wouldn't hurt. It wouldn't hurt because awareness of the illness is necessary. Now, one can argue about whether it's good for a person to have awareness of their illness. Obviously, there will be many who say it's not good. But I am 100% sure that the first step towards any improvement, development, or healing is for a person to acknowledge that something is wrong with them. Now, this might not necessarily be an illness. It could be any kind of problem, like the inability to separate from one's mother, or vice versa, when a mother realizes that she is actually in love with her son. I also spoke about this in a previous issue of Fanny magazine. This is the Jocasta complex. But the point is that Everyone should realize what their problem is, what their disturbance is, what is hindering them from having a balanced sexual life. And once they have called a spade, and finally called the sexless relationship by its original name, an estranged relationship from that point on, the path to improvement begins. Just by acknowledging that something is not right with me, something is not right with my relationship. So let's leave behind these gentle, sweet, kind, almost flattering names. Let's look in the mirror and be honest, at least with ourselves. Now, returning to the sexless relationship. How different it sounds to say sexless, which almost absolves a person from the fact that there should actually be sex in a relationship. Because by calling it sexless, we create a new category in relationships. One relationship, is like this, another is like that. The third is sexless. The fourth is so-and-so. Just one among many. So what? It's just another category. And from the word sexless, from this adjective, it doesn't show that, damn, something is wrong here. In contrast, the name of an estranged relationship already indicates that a relationship should be warm, loving, and full of sex. But it is not, because estranged, as a past participle, shows that something started in the past and also ended, and now we have reached a state and we are in it and it has become fixed. This expression is very, very beautiful, and I would like to use this expression for this problem. Because no matter how friendly or loving, a relationship where there is no sex is still estranged, thus in a passive structure. For a long time, we learned that in the Hungarian language, the passive structure is not beautiful, not native, not good. I think we should use it freely. Obviously, the usual example, like the cat is climbed up the tree, is a bit forced, but for instance, saying the couple is estranged from each other fits perfectly. Why do I actually spend so much time on words and their meanings? Because a nation lives in its language, and just by naming something, we already influence ourselves and others. It's completely different if I tell someone they are uncouth, or if I say they are rude. The two can mean the same thing, but somehow the feeling behind them is different. I convey something different, and the person will feel differently as well. A person labeled as uncouth will not feel as uncomfortable, as someone I called rude. Now, returning to the topic of estranged relationships, indeed, those who are in an estranged relationship should feel uncomfortable because this is not normal. It is so common now that it needs to be talked about, written about, and I don't know exactly how it was in the past, but it's quite possible that there weren't as many sexless relationships as there are nowadays. I can't state this with 100% certainty, but I have a feeling that perhaps it wasn't as widespread. I think this Because nowadays you can list 1,000 reasons why someone might not want to live a sexual life. In the past, these triggering factors weren't present. So, for example, one such reason is the frequent use of mobile phones. Whether we like it or not, it burdens our brain. And since sex is brain controlled, originating from and ending in the brain, even though orgasms have physical signs, they still function by stimulating brain areas, a reachable state, which is why I can say that sex completely originates from the brain and also concludes there. So, if something is disturbing your brain, then there will be no sex further on. Initially, it just decreases, and eventually it ceases altogether. So the mobile phone is an extremely strong factor in this regard. Whatever you do on the mobile, talking on the phone is not yet but anything. That is like this. No, but anything. That is like this. Associated with screen viewing. That is indeed. So the eye is the next alongside the brain, whose strain causes problems in sexual life. So everything you do with your eyes and brain simultaneously on the mobile phone or computer, but the mobile phone definitely leads in the first place. It would be unnecessary, but I can even list what all can be done on the mobile phone. I sometimes admit I am confused about how much I should be spoon feeding or not, because I notice that there is an increasing demand for spoon feeding, meaning that I should explain everything in excruciating detail. But sometimes, in the past when I was still spoon feeding and I worked in the press as an investigative reporter, then the leader said that this is not the news broadcast that was played for people during communist times when the TV told people what they should think. So I should not tell people what to think, but rather just uncover facts. And then they will decide what they think. And I have adapted to this so much that in many cases I am no longer so didactic. I describe cases, show stories, like what helped that person, for instance, to overcome their sexual problem. But I don't necessarily break it down into points, like you should do this and that. At the same time, there is quite a demand for this. So returning to the mobile phone, obviously browsing all kinds of social media, reading news, we talk very little about this, although reading news can be just as distracting. Especially nowadays when there are a lot of negative news that might greatly influence our lives. Then obviously pornography, so to speak. I shouldn't even have to mention it. So pornography. Unfortunately, music videos also fall into this category. So if someone is watching music videos on their computer, mobile, or even on TV, these also have a harmful effect on sexuality, because there are many music videos where, I would sometimes put a rating on them, let's say a 12+ rating, and it inevitably influences people when they constantly see women shaking their hips in music videos. They might start expecting that his wife or girlfriend should shake her hips the same way, and if she doesn't do it, or if her hips aren't like the ones seen in music videos, then the man might not even feel the urge to have good sex with that woman. So this is also part of it, la. But I say that even the innocent Fokonam sex neutral news can be influential. Of course, the sweepstakes, those who play the lottery or do anything on their mobile, that's not good either. Then the various interactive games, let's say these are usually played on computers. Really any kind of game, test, quiz, fortune telling, anything that is on the internet. All of these belong here. The more you do them, the less your brain has left at the end of the day to be interested in sex. And of course, the endless chatting, dating, etc., etc. So in reality, I couldn't even list how many things you can do on a mobile that aren't very beneficial. Perhaps GPS is an exception because you don't look at it continuously and you're driving in the meantime. But you all know this anyway. I felt it was somewhat unnecessary to mention. See? Previous comment. Returning to my previous half sentence B. By the end of the day, the brain won't have the strength to focus on other sources of joy because it's exhausted. We always hear from neuroscientists that we don't utilize our brain capacity, and most people use it very minimally, etc., etc. From this, we can infer a terribly incorrect conclusion, and I definitely want to clarify this now. To dispel this misconception and correct this belief, which is that the brain can be pushed to its limits because it can handle it, since we don't use its full capacity anyway. Well, no. It is indeed a fact that every day is a new opportunity. So in the morning, every morning, we have the opportunity to mess up that day as well. But the fact is, if during the day we engage in activities that strain the brain, then our brain certainly gets tired. After all, why wouldn't it get tired? Just as any part of our body gets tired if we use it a lot, the brain is also capable of getting tired. Logical, isn't it? So it cannot be overloaded to the extreme, even if we don't use it to its full capacity. Moreover, the bad news in this regard is that when we perform certain activities, we use specific areas of the brain and not the others. So, for example, in cases of porn addiction, it has been observed that the amygdala, the ventral striatum, and the anterior-posterior cingulate cortex are activated, and the excessive activation of these three areas causes hypofrontality syndrome. I won't go into this too much now. Those who are interested can read my book titled How to Handle Porn Addiction. The point is that it's not good to overuse certain areas of the brain, and it's not only undesirable to neglect parts of the brain, but it's also contraindicated to overstimulate them. And this is the area we talk about much less than we should. So we have one brain that can be overloaded throughout the day. And by the end of the day, depending on the impressions you received during the day, or even by your partner, you may feel like having sex, or you may not. And then again, by the end of the day, it can be inferred from this little half sentence of mine that the solution might be to start the day with sex. And then you won't be uninterested by the end of the day due to the many different stimuli. I often suggest this to couples actually, so morning sex would solve a lot of things, and usually men react positively, while women react negatively. This is because most women do not feel the sexual desire in the morning that men naturally feel due to morning erections.